What is up, guys? We are back with another video, and today we're checking out a motherboard that I've really wanted to get my hands on pretty much since the X570 launch. It is ASRock's X570 Phantom Gaming ITX TB3. So let's go ahead and take a look. As you could have guessed from the product name, this is an ITX motherboard, and there's only a handful of X570 ITX motherboards out there. This is the only one that ASRock is currently making. They have put it in their Phantom Gaming line, so you have that cool Phantom Gaming look, black PCB with the silver and black and red accents throughout. Now, starting at the CPU socket, we of course have AMD's AM4 socket, and X570 motherboards will support both second and third generation Ryzen processors. Now, looking at the CPU socket, you can obviously see that something is missing. So we don't have the AM4 mounting bars or mounting clips or whatever you want to call them. They're not actually on this board. To save space, because those do take up a decent amount of space on a motherboard, ASRock has installed Intel default mounting holes. So basically they made it so you can mount any LGA 11.5X CPU cooler on this board. Now, there are some limitations, and we will get into that a little bit further in this review. ASRock is using a 10-phase power design in an 8+2 configuration on this board. This is pretty much the same configuration that they use on their normal ATX boards. So it is very solid, but of course you have that heat in this small form factor. So to combat that, they actually have these very large heat sinks, which you can see here. But another really cool thing they did is this heatsink back here, it actually goes up into the entire I/O cover. So the entire I/O cover is actually metal, so that's gonna help dissipate all of that heat. Right above your CPU socket, you have your 8-pin EPS connector up here. Pretty easy to access even with these larger heat sinks. And then right on the other side of that large heatsink, you have two 4-pin fan headers. One is of course your CPU fan header, and then you have an optional CPU fan header, and then there is a 4-pin standard RGB header. Moving over to the memory slots, you of course have two DDR4 DIMM slots. These slots are not metal reinforced on this board, but they do have the non-locking bottoms. This allows you to easily pop out or swap out memory if you have a graphics card installed. Now, this board supports DDR4 memory all the way up to 4533 megahertz, so definitely pretty high support for such a small motherboard. Along the edge of the board, you have a 3-pin addressable RGB header, 24-pin ATX power connection, a USB 3.2 Gen 1 header, and then 4 SATA 6 gig ports, and they are at the 90-degree angle so they don't interfere with your graphics card or anything like that. Coming down to the bottom section of this board, of course, the thing that really stands out is this big heatsink and active cooling fan. So it is an actual heatsink that sits on top of the X570 chipset, and then you have an active cooling fan as well. To help cooling even more, ASRock has actually connected a heat pipe to your Vrm Cooling. Right next to that large heatsink, you have a few more headers. So you have your front panel headers, a USB 2.0 header, 4-pin fan header, and a TPM header. It's really great that you have another 4-pin fan header. So including the CPU, optional CPU fan in this, you actually get 3 fan headers on this board, which I think is really good for a ITX motherboard. All the way at the bottom of the board, you have a PCI Express 4.0 X16 slot. This is metal reinforced, as you can see, so it's ready to handle those very large and heavy graphics cards. And then right over here, you have your HD audio header. As we move over to the rear I/O, we can see it has a nice integrated I/O shield, which has the Phantom Gaming logo on it. As far as connections and buttons go, you have a combination PS2 port, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports, Wi-Fi antenna connections, a clear CMOS button, DisplayPort, HDMI, a Thunderbolt and USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, gigabit Ethernet, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-A ports, and your audio connections. Now, as we flip the board over to the back here, we do have a PCI Express 4.0 M.2 slot, and that M.2 slot does not come with any type of cooling built in or anything like that. I really wish they would have put cooling here, just for the fact that a lot of these Gen 4 drives that we reviewed come with these massive coolers, and I think having, you know, built-in cooling that would actually fit this, you know, very thin space would be kind of nice to have built in. All right, so let's talk about the actual mounting on this board. I did mention that these are Intel mounting holes, so default Intel mounting holes. So pretty much any Intel CPU cooler will fit these holes. But the thing and the problem that you run into is that this heatsink, the proximity of this heatsink and this heatsink make it really hard to install larger CPU coolers on this. We tried a Noctua, we tried a Cooler Master air cooler on here, you know, Intel, and it did not work. We did, of course, get a Corsair AIO to fit on here. Most Corsair AIOs will fit on this board, but they do have a list. ASRock does have a list of what will fit on this, but I would really only recommend, especially if you're running, you know, an 8-core or even, you know, a 6-core Ryzen processor, I would, you know, in such a small space, I would only recommend an AIO as it goes there. So that's definitely something to think about, because again, when you buy a Ryzen processor, you do get a pretty decent cooler with it. So, you know, with this board, you are going to have to buy an aftermarket cooler. Again, ASRock does have that list on their website. It's not a whole lot of coolers. Most of them are low profile and most of them are AIOs, but we did get, again, a Corsair AIO to fit on here, no problem. This board also has RGB lighting. Of course, you can't come out with a motherboard without RGB lighting here in 2020. So you have a row of RGB LEDs at the bottom of the board. So if you do have a 2-slot graphics card installed, you will get a little bit of underglow from the bottom of the board. This is, of course, controlled by ASRock's Polychrome Sync software. So at the end of the day, I think ASRock has a really great board here. Now, again, there's only a handful of ITX X570 motherboards out there, and I think ASRock has done some really great things to not only make this a great performing board, but a board that kind of stands out, you know, amongst those 3 or 4 other boards that are out there. One of the biggest things is, of course, Thunderbolt 3. This is the only board that I know of that's X570 ITX and has Thunderbolt 3 built in. You know, that gives you 40 gigabits per second of transfer speed. You know, so again, as I said, super fast storage. You can connect displays. You can do a lot of other cool stuff that way, you know, with this. So if you're looking for that, this is the only board that's going to offer that. I also like that they really concentrated on keeping VRM cooling under wraps here. You know, we have these massive heat sinks. This entire IO cover is metal, it's not plastic. So that helps with this heatsink, and of course, you know, helps just keep everything nice and cool. We do have the active cooling fan built onto a rather large heatsink coming out at this angle. Again, they've just done a lot to really do, you know, really keep VRM cooling down, and I really like that as well. This is a Phantom Gaming board. It has the Phantom Gaming look, which I really like. It's going to give you USB 3.2 Gen 2 on here. You're also going to get Wi-Fi 6, which of course is pretty standard on a lot of high-end X570 boards as well. Now, the only thing that is a little bit of a caveat with this board is that there's only going to be a limited amount of CPU coolers that are really going to fit this. We would only really recommend an AIO, and they have a list of what's supported on their website. Big air coolers, like we wanted to put a big Noctua on this and just make it look like a monstrosity, and we weren't able to do that because of the proximity of these heat sinks and actually how tall they are. So that's definitely something that you're going to want to think about. Now, this board is selling for $219.99 right now, which we think is a really good deal considering all the features that you are getting. And of course, you know, you can build an amazing Ryzen system with this board. It is going to be able to support, you know, your 8-core 16-thread processors, It is the VRM cooling is going to be good. You know, you can fit this out with a 2080 Ti and it's just gonna be an awesome little system. So if you have any questions about this board, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. And we will have links where you can, of course, pick this board up, as well as our full written review that has all of our benchmarks and everything like that. Now, if you enjoyed this video, we would appreciate it if you hit that thumbs up. And if you enjoy our tech content, go ahead and subscribe. We'll see you guys in the next video.